Namaste and welcome to the Bharatvaarta Weekly. This is the 111th edition of the weekly. I'm Roshan Karyappa. I have with me Abhishek Paul and Neerav Kanodra here to discuss the news and events from the week that was. And it was quite an interesting week, I should say. India abstained from voting regarding the human rights situation in China's Xinjiang at the UNHRC. The World Bank slashed India's economic growth forecast to 6.5% for FY23. There was also some controversy spawned by the movie Ponniyin Selvan, on whether Shaivites are Hindus at all. Dubai inaugurated a new grand Hindu temple. OPEC, OPEC cut production, and then there was a response from India as well. In more geopolitical news, Ukraine blew up a bridge in Crimea, and that whole situation is developing in a very interesting way as well. All of this and more on this weekly. If you're catching us on one of the podcast platforms, do take a moment to rate, review us. It'll help more people discover our content. So Abhishek, Neerav, how's it going?
All good, Carrie.
Going good, Ken.
Did you guys catch the episode we put out last week, Abhishek?
Yeah, so I think I caught like 70% of this one. Very interesting episode. I think this is Sunil's like third or fourth time on Bharatvaarta, I believe. So yeah, I mean, he gives a very good on the ground picture, like for someone, because he lives in the UK, right? So very interesting comments. I think I was able to relate quite well to them in the sense some of the topics he covered, like the importance of the monarchy and the queen in particular to the lives of I would say the average British, right? I think some of us who don't live under a monarchy probably do not really get the importance of that institution. But he was able to quite well explain it, right? In terms of how it brings a sort of stability and a sort of, how do I say, a constant presence in people's life, right? Which is like a reassuring thing for many people, right? That there is always this institution to give a sort of common bond to the entire nation, right? It's not a political organization or a political institution. So that's something which I guess people across the spectrum can sort of relate to. He also talked about the clashes at Leicester between the Hindu and Muslim communities, and he kind of gave a very interesting background, right? That some of us or people who don't follow UK would know, right? Including things like the whole very unfortunate incidents of the whole grooming gangs that sort of run rampant a few years or maybe a decade or so back, and how a lot of the British media and establishment sort of remained silent, right, till it became a mainstream news, because finally some of the victims were able to speak out and come clean on that. So I think it was a very interesting episode. Obviously, UK is in a bit of a turmoil right now with a new government who's rather sort of aggressive tax cuts and trying to reform the British economy hasn't really gone down well with the markets and all that. So yeah, I think UK remains a place to sort of watch out for. Good episode.
Yeah, I mean, there's just been such a confluence of things, right? With the monarchy changing, and a new prime minister, and then the Leicester riots, and the whole experiment with the economy. So it was, such a storm of things that it made sense for us to have Sunil, really take us through whatever is happening there. Right, and given the importance of UK as well, given that we have an FTA to be signed this year, right, and we have close ties to the nation, right. I mean, it was a great perspective from the ground, as you say, right. So do check it out if you haven't already. And if you like the episode, please share it on all your social media platforms. Moving on. Well, India abstained on a UNHRC resolution regarding the human rights situation in China's Xinjiang. On Thursday, India abstained from voting on a draft resolution in the UN Human Rights Council, holding a debate on the human rights situation in China's Xinjiang region. The Indian side didn't offer an explanation for its decision to abstain from the draft resolution. More about the draft resolution. It was presented by a group consisting of Canada, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, UK, and the US, and co-sponsored by a range of states, including Turkey. The ultimate vote went in favor of China, with 19 members of the UNHRC opposing the resolution and 11 members, including India, Malaysia, and Ukraine, abstaining. China, Indonesia, Nepal, Pakistan, Qatar, Sudan, the United Arab Emirates, and are some of the nations that voted against the resolution. Well, what do you make of this, Abhishek?
Yeah, I think India, while didn't giving an explanation on the day, the foreign ministry spokesperson spoke about it, I think, a day or two later to explain the government's position. So basically, the explanation is that India tries generally not to take sides in situations which are basically related to a country's internal affairs. And Xinjiang is, while it's obviously a very unfortunate situation there, it is still a part of China, right? And so it's up to China to get its act together there. I mean, India did express concerns, saying that obviously India is concerned about the situation there and wants all citizens of that region to get their fair shake, right, under the law. But at the United Nations, India sort of kept its usual stance of abstaining from resolutions or affairs which pertain to the internal affairs of any other country. Obviously, this gave an opportunity for the opposition parties in India to take some shots at the government. Various parties such as Asauddin Owaisi or the Congress, they all commented saying that this vote basically shows that the Modi government is kind of afraid of China, of taking on China, and kind of plays into the whole narrative that the BJP hasn't really allowed debate in parliament about the affairs of the at the border, right? The ongoing sort of 1.5, 2-year-old situation at the Chinese border, as well as this case, right? So, I mean, a lot of people do say that India has actually given up parts of territory to China, right? In terms of the disputed territories, probably China is more in control today than in the past, right? So that is one of the allegations. So yeah, I think the government has basically decided to sort of keep its stand consistent. It is also true that probably India doesn't want to aggravate China anymore, and sort of hopes that the situation gets better on the border front. And this is probably one way of signaling that. So yeah, overall, I'm not really surprised by the move, but yeah, obviously it leads to the government facing some flack from the opposition.
So first of all, as you mentioned, I think it's a complete virtue signal game, right? I mean, with a veto,
Yeah,
I mean,
of
there's
course.
really nothing much that's going to happen.
UNHRC or even Security Council, we know that there are people who have veto power, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of this is just academic exercise or virtue signaling. But the question is, which virtues are you signaling, right? To whom? On which block are you going with, right? So, for example, on the Ukraine situation, like our virtue signaling has not been aligned with the West, right? So it's not like if India voted against the Russian invasion, the invasion would stop, right? I mean, Russia themselves are part of the Security Council, top big five, and even China would go with Russia. So it's not like the Indian vote matters, but it is kind of a signal that, okay, we are locked in step with the West, which we have sort of so far refused to be.
Yeah, I think, it's a matter of values and interests, right? As Dr. Jaishankar often says. And we should be really, really judicious in taking these positions in internal matters, right? I mean, however egregious they are. And it should always have a strategic intent. So it can't really be like a schoolyard fight that, hey, I mean, he did that, and so we are doing this sort of a thing, right? I mean, it definitely can't be like that.
Yeah.
So, all right, moving on. The World Bank slashed India's economic growth forecast to 6.5% for FY23. This is down from the 7.5% it had predicted in June. Recently, the RBI had also cut growth estimates for the current fiscal to 7% from 7.2%. The IMF is also expected to revise its estimates for the country in the coming weeks. These cuts come as a result of the blowback of the Russia-Ukraine war and ongoing geopolitical tensions and aggressive monetary policy tightening globally. Well, I think it must be one of the most difficult jobs to get these forecasts right in these tumultuous times. Nirav, what do we make of these forecasts?
Yeah, sure. So see, forecast, is India going to slow down? I think yes, that's a given. Like given all the things that are happening, so you have tighter monetary policy, so like higher cost of capital, higher cost of energy, higher cost of like other commodities like metals, etc. And then you also have recently higher cost of labor, because post-COVID there's been a lot of people either quietly quitting or being aggressively in asking for raises, etc. Right? So this is a global phenomenon. A lot of people have like kind of come down on the current government, but I want to put this in context that what has the World Bank, it's not just come out with a report for India, right? It has come out for all global forecasts. So what are their forecasts for the year 2023? For the whole world, GDP growth is slowing down to 2.4% from 3.2 earlier. Advanced economies at 1.2%. Emerging market economies at 4.1%. China, this year, they had a very high forecast earlier, but realized is low because they had zero COVID. So China expected to grow this year at 2.6, but they expect opening up from zero COVID. So there's a rebound, reboost, some revenge consumption. When the economy opens up, that's we've seen in India as well, and most of the world. So China forecast is 5.3%, right? So putting all this in context, whether India grows at 6.5 or 7 or 6.8 or whatever it is, yes, will India slow down? Totally agree. Unless like the government does some crazy fiscal stimulus or RBI doesn't hike rates, then we have inflation problem which will come with a lag. So I think slowdown is there. A lot of things are moving. See, these forecasts, they keep coming up every 3 months. So June was one, like end of September is another one. They'll have another one in end of December. So these are all moving targets. In these things, India stands out relatively as a better off country. So two things I wanted to highlight. A couple of the East Asian countries, so remove China, but like Japan, Korea, Taiwan, their exports are very big percentage of their GDP, right? So they will suffer a bit more due to slowdown in the West, right? So that is one thing. Europe has suffered a lot due to energy dependence on Russia and this whole energy transition. US is relatively better placed among the advanced economies. India is relatively better placed amongst the emerging market economies. And like top 10 economies of the world, maybe like some small oil producing nation like Qatar or something could have like, because LNG prices are up, can have like a much higher GDP. But India has the highest GDP in the top 10 economies of the world, right? So I think that is still, you can look at it whichever way you want, but I think the glass is still like 80% full, right? You see people like, I'll give an example, our previous economic advisor to the FinMin, Kaushik Basu, coming in and saying, oh, like it's so bad or it's so dire. I think he's looking at it from one biased angle, right? Can India do better? Yes, it can do better, but it can do a lot worse as well. So yes, all these forecasts are there. Hopefully, like it's all about like India trying to achieve its own potential. One of the other positive things mentioned is the inflation currently, which is over 7%, is expected to go below 6% in FY23, right? So that's a positive. So I think net, if you look at all the forecasts, India actually looks a little bit better. And frankly, a lot of these forecasts are wrong 80% of the time. 40% of the time wrong on the upside, 40% time wrong on the downside. On target, if you say like plus minus 0.1, 0.2% is only 20% of the time, right? So we've got to take these forecasts a little bit with a pinch of salt. But as we see data evolving, as we see everything coming up, I agree that maybe India does slow down. It'll be somewhere in the range 6.5 to 7%. Let's see where it is, right? So hopefully, you look at it as still glass almost full. You see you're doing relatively much better than rest of the world. And the thing is, you have to keep up the momentum. India had like one big break during COVID, where we saw economy contract and then come back up. So we were kind of, so 2019 to 2021 were kind of flat, because 2020 we went down, 2021 we came up. So now we're just coming back at the old pace, and that's all fine. As in, it's just some people are making a big UN cry out of it. I don't think that's a big issue.
Neerav, just a question on the US, right? I mean, you're seeing inflation at 8.5%, right? Unemployment at 3.5% in September again, right? What do you think is going to happen? Because the Fed will have to increase rates again, right? And engineer some sort of a recession. And Harsh made the point on the podcast, some time back, whether it's a soft landing or hard landing, right? We don't know about that, and that's the only thing, right? So what do you think is going to happen there? And as they say, when the US sneezes, I mean, everyone catches a cold, right? So what is going to happen as a consequence of that to us?
So I think, look, US is the cleanest dirty shirt amongst like the developed economies, right? US is self-sufficient in terms of oil production. It imports a bit and exports a bit. So like net, it's flat, right? If the prices go up, because it goes to the oil industry, which is in the US, maybe consumers are paying more, but maybe another sector of the economy is doing well, right? Instead of like somewhere where you're importing from overseas, like India, so I think on the terms of energy, US is net flat. In terms of, yes, you've got high inflation, so very tight labor market, and so the cost of borrowing will rise. But in the US, a lot of consumers are not that leveraged as they were before 2008. A lot of consumers usually borrow on fixed rates for 30-year mortgages. So I think on the whole, US, while it will slow down, yes, maybe there's soft landing, maybe hard landing further down, that will happen. I think one of the major things which might be a bit tough is this era of easy money. Saw because a lot of the pension funds, asset managers had to chase growth at anything, because you got almost 0 to 1% on your government bonds, and you had to deliver 5-6% nominal return. You took a lot of risky bets. So some of it is venture capital, right? And stuff like that, which got funded because they're chasing growth. Maybe we see a little bit less of that. Maybe we see, because if you can invest in like 10-year government bonds in the US and get 2%, you need not take that much risk on your portfolio. So I think that is one thing. It is also like a second, third order effect. So yes, also demand destruction. The countries which export a lot more to the US will be affected. So India does export a lot of IT services, but not so much goods. So that's also something. So we will see. I think US is relatively resilient, and I think India is also reasonably resilient. See, these effects will happen. We will have an aftershock. That is fine. But all the things which are driven on domestic consumption, and I think you've mentioned PLI schemes many times. PLI schemes, even if we don't export a lot, I think we have a lot of import substitution to do for ourselves. So I think those things make India relatively better off. Both are, you would say, good but not great. Let's put it that way, right? So
yeah, there's a great thread by Arpit Gupta, who is, I think, a professor at NYU Stern. And he does this week in India kind of a thread pretty regularly on Twitter. Definitely follow him, Arpit, RAGE. That's his Twitter handle, where he talks about the manufacturing PLIs, and he's aggregated a bunch of news items around that. So we should definitely maybe get him on the podcast sometime to discuss some of these things. All right, moving on, closer home. Maniratnam's Ponniyin Selvan, the film, stoked some debate on whether the legendary uh, Raja 1 can be called a Hindu emperor, with many arguing that Hindu religion didn't exist then. To quote, "It is very important to treat art in the right form. We will lose our identities if we don't treat them properly. Our identities are being constantly misappropriated." So Vetrimaran, who is this was quoted by Vetrimaran, implying that Cholas were Shaivites and Hinduism didn't exist at that time. Kamal Hassan again came out in strong support for the director after BJP leader H. Raja objected to Vetrimaran's claim. Kamal Hassan said that there was no name called Hindu religion during Raja Cholan's period. At that time, there were Vaishnavites and Shaivites, and it was the British who coined the term Hindu because they did not know how to express it collectively. Well, whatever else is said about this, one thing I will say is that go and watch the film, if not just for the beauty and aesthetics. It's a really nice movie. Don't go with some grand expectations, but it's still worth a watch. It's about 3 hours long, a tad long for my my taste, but still, it's really, really nice. Definitely check it out. Some of these remarks, it makes me feel like like saying that gravity didn't exist before Newton discovered it, right? I mean, Hindu, the term has been an external descriptor, and there are many different theories about it, about the land between the Himalayas and the Sindhu, and just a descriptor for the kind of practices that we followed, right? You could call it Sanatana Dharma, which is originally what it is. Right, but I think all of this stems from sort of a one god centralized dogmatic framework of things, right? The Western framework, so to speak. And I think when you look at it from that lens, I mean, everything is drawn in hard lines. There is no overlaps, and I feel like all of this is sort of coming out of that framework, right? To be honest, it's a laughable debate, right? But it's often good to sort of expose these ideas, right? Like they say, sunlight is the best disinfectant. So it's good that there is more talk about these things, so that people really understand some of these arguments that are being made, and who's making them and why, and so on. With respect to Kamal Hassan, I think Cho had the best quote about Kamal, right? He used to say that Kamal is an intellectual among actors and an actor among intellectuals. And I think there's no better way of putting it. I mean, some of his views and everything, it reminds me of the kind of things that I used to think when I was 13 or 14, right? When you're flushed with this rage against the machine, and you've just been newly infected with the ideas of Marx and whatnot, right? I mean, it's only that sadly, Kamal hasn't outgrown these views, even after 40 years or 50 years of adult life, right? It's pretty sad to see that. And just this whole thread of appropriating everything Hindu with right wing or BJP, I think that's just fallacious, really, really fallacious. And if the elections have not proven, the last two elections have not proven this convincingly, I don't know what will, right? The fact that there is it's a very visceral thing, right? I mean, dharma is a very visceral thing. You cannot go against that in India, right? And how much ever you throw the constitution at the face of it, or how much ever you say that, hey, we're a secular liberal country and we're a modern nation, all of that, right? Dharma is essential to living here. And I think the more politicians make make this about make this us versus them kind of a positioning, I think they stand to lose, right? They clearly stand to lose. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting debate. It's a debate that shouldn't have existed, but but for the fact that, hey, I mean, some of these cookie sort of views are exposed, right? Abhishek, are you watching the movie sometime?
Not yet, so maybe I will, or maybe I'll wait for it to come on OTTs. But yeah, I think
There are subtitles.
yeah. So I also know that you don't know Tamil, so it's okay.
Hey, come on. I mean, I know reasonable amount of Tamil, better than any Bangalorean for sure, right? But not
So
the
yeah,
old Tamil that
yeah.
they speak. Yeah.
But I would say that this sort of debate reminded me of the other debate we have in India, which is that India itself did not exist before
Yeah.
1947 or something like that, right? So
Yeah.
basically, look, the thing is that there is a section in Tamil Nadu, as there is a section in, I would say, several other states, which basically believes in the exceptionalism of their own state, right? And so, and therefore, the
Subnationalism,
idea,
it's called.
subnationalism, of course. So,
Yeah.
the idea is that uh, if something great has happened in the past in Tamil Nadu, it is only for that state, right? And they do not want the larger Hindu population to be inheritors of that, right? Of this greatness. And so, I mean, we also talked about the term Sanatan Dharma, right? So listen to what people like Chidambaram or Kharge use. They use Sanatan Dharma as an insult, actually. That we have to get rid of this Sanatan Dharma from India or from Tamil Nadu and things like that. And they use it to describe or use it to describe RSS and Hindutva and things like that, right? So or everything that is regressive in Hinduism is basically Sanatan Dharma. That's how the term is used by certain sections of, I would say, the politicians of Tamil Nadu, especially. So, yeah, I mean, it's a sort of unfortunate thing to say that Shaivism is not a part of Hinduism is quite silly on the face of, I mean, to most people it will sound silly, but I guess some intellectuals of Tamil Nadu think otherwise, so can't really do much. I mean, people can say whatever, but it does sound pretty silly.
Yeah, this is an argument only an intellectual or a supposed intellectual can make, right? I mean,
Yeah.
try convincing a grandmother something like this, right? I mean, it's absurd. Anyway, speaking of Dharma and Sanatan Dharma and those things, well, OPEC cut production of oil, and there was an interesting response from India as well. OPEC has decided to side with Russia and cut its oil output by 2 million barrels a day, stoking fears of recession the world over. The West has criticized this move and plans to punish certain countries in the OPEC. Indian Minister for Petroleum, however, termed this move as a sovereign right and said that India is confident of navigating the situation further. He further added that India will buy oil from wherever it has to, and no country has told it to stop buying Russian oil. Nirav, this again makes the whole situation tricky, right?
Yeah. So see, what has happened is actually, again, like a lot of the headlines are very alarmist, right? So let's put like rough numbers. So one is China, because of zero COVID, right? China is the second biggest consumer of oil after the US. If you put rough numbers, like approximately global production and consumption is about 100 million barrels a day. And US actually produces 18-19 million barrels a day, all of it which it consumes. Because of certain different quality of crude and some refineries are calibrated one way or another, they import some and they export some. But net, they are flat. OPEC, the old OPEC, has controls about 33 million barrels a day, which is 1/3 of the world's production and consumption. And OPEC Plus includes 10 other nations, but the most significant is Russia, right? Russia, Sudan, South Sudan, Malaysia, all of those come who are not part of the original OPEC. They're part of OPEC Plus. So OPEC is a cartel which functions very well. There's an old rule of thumb, and that kind of broke down when US shale ramped up production. Because everybody else was producing at 100% capacity, only OPEC had the dial where it could increase or decrease production. And 1% cut in production, or sometimes even there's some blast, some output is gone, 1% change in output leads to a short-term spike of 8% in price, right? This 2% cut, already the market was expecting 1 to 1.5%, right? It was known in this meeting, they actually decided. And recently oil prices have actually fallen. Why? because Europe is almost on the verge of a recession. So demand actually falls, right? Similarly, same thing, 1% fall in demand leads to 8% fall in prices. So OPEC has the lever, right? Because they only have 1/3 of the world production. By cutting out like 1% of world production is 3% of your own production. You can actually increase price by 8%. So they have that lever. They don't want the world to get into a deep recession also, because then eventually you see that their demand for their product falls, right? So they are very smart at it. As in the OPEC, you think a lot of these Middle Eastern nations, the people are not very educated, etc. But a lot of OPEC actually runs a reasonable strategy. It failed from 2014 to 2020 when US started producing more and they had the lever. Now what has happened is, because of ESG norms, because of a lot of regulations which the Biden administration has put in, it is difficult to drill for more shale. So actually US has shot itself in the foot there. And so that is also running at capacity. It's no longer the swing producer. So it cannot ramp up easily. So this is what they've done. Prices have gone up by 5-6%, right? So it's not end of the world. OPEC also is very smart. They don't want the prices to rise too much, where people start using alternatives or reducing their consumption drastically. So this is what it is. So yes, will the oil price be higher? It is higher. Yes, fine. Can India deal with it? Yes. India has smartly kept relationship alive. Our traditional suppliers were UAE and Saudi for bulk of our oil. And now we are also taking some Russian oil. So we've reduced, but we've not completely broken down the relationship. So India says, see, it is their internal decision again, and we will import oil, what is best for us. We don't have any other sort of issues. We just need our own energy security, and we will purchase from wherever it's available. So that's what it is. The whole world, actually, what has happened is, in the last decade, I mentioned this earlier, right? World was very comfortable in a Goldilocks phase: cheap capital, cheap energy, or cheaper than average energy, and cheap labor. And all these three have kind of gone down. You're like very smooth, friction-free global trade. Everything is made in China, shipped off easily, without any bottlenecks, without anything. So all these things are coming in, the sand being thrown in the gears. So obviously there's going to be repercussions. It is about how resilient or how fragile are you. So India is actually fragile to energy price. I think that's the biggest, I would say, Achilles heel for India. But this is not like a drastic change. And I think the problem will happen when China really opens up, Chinese demand goes up. Maybe we see OPEC increasing production again then. So yeah, that is what it is. But don't expect oil prices to come crashing down or spiking like crazily higher even. I think they will kind of like manage it. So because it's in their best interest. You don't want to kill off your customer, right? So yeah, it's in their best interest to extract, like a monopolist, extract the maximum price that you can without killing off your customer. And OPEC actually, since the 70s, they do a very good job at it.
What do you make of the US sanctions against, the Indian petrochemical company for some, to quote, clandestine Iran oil purchases, right? I mean, I think the company is called Tibalaji Petrochem.
So I think, see, this is you're trying like slapping the wrist. What is going to happen is, like, a lot of Iranian oil directly, indirectly was being blended, apparently, like in Malaysia. Like, I don't want to be quoted here, but it finds its way. Oil is a globally traded commodity. It is reasonably uniform in chemical composition, so it can be substituted, and these things find their way. US actually, on Russia, the sanctions are much lower compared to what the sanctions. There are second order sanctions on Iran. So on Russia, they know that there is a leakage. It is just they're trying to hurt Russia, but not so much that you yourself get hurt, because Europe is very much dependent on Russian energy, right? So they don't want that. So, and Russia is the third biggest producer of oil. So US 1, Saudi 2, Russia 3. So you don't want to shut that off totally. Iran is a relatively smaller producer of oil, though they have a lot of reserves. So there's a lot of potential in Iran. So anyways, I think these are like small slaps on the wrist. They need to show that they have the stick. But as you can see, their role of global policeman is kind of retreating in this way, right? and you're going towards like a large multipolar world. So I think this is what it is. There is, so even via Turkey, apparently, like Iranian oil flows via Turkey to other places where it is blended and like mixed and something. In Russian oil, there is a Latvian and a Lithuanian blend where they kind of blend it with something else, a little bit of you import oil from elsewhere, from Norway, and then you take Russian oil, blend it out, and then you say this, right? So it is a lot of this is all smoke and mirrors. This is just to actually more to show that you have some power and more to keep their voters happy inside their country. So that's about it.
Right. A new grand Hindu temple was inaugurated in Dubai. It opened its doors to worshippers on the occasion of Dasera in the Jebel Ali area of Dubai. It is an extension of the Sindhi Guru Darbar temple, one of the oldest Hindu temples in the UAE. The new temple houses 16 Hindu deities and also the Guru Granth Sahib. The multi-religious complex described as a worship village in Jebel Ali also houses several churches and the Guru Nanak Darbar Gurudwara. Abhishek, this is pretty nice, right? And especially in the Middle East, the expats will, the Indian expat population there will really benefit from this.
Yeah, of course. So I think India-UAE relations have been pretty good for quite a while now, right? And Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Sharjah, I think these centers are filled with many Indians of all sort of regions of India as well as all classes, right? So not only do working class people go and try to, make a living in UAE, but also I would say some of India's top talent also goes, right? Whether it is technology or finance and things like that. So I think, and Dubai, of course, as we know, has become like one of those big major global centers, right? Like Singapore or Hong Kong now. So yeah, I think the UAE in general has been beginning to fashion itself more and more as a modern state and society, and this is one more step for them. I hope things continue to go in that direction. In fact, I would say even Saudi under Prince Salman has been sort of a little bit opening up, right, in terms of coming out with a sort of more progressive face. So these are some, I would say, steady developments happening in the Middle East in the long term. I think people do not like to give credit to the Trump administration, but in general, they saw, let's say, interesting developments like Israel having relations with UAE, right, for the first time. So a lot of these changes have been happening slowly in the background, where UAE especially, and to some smaller extent Saudi, has been sort of becoming, I would say, become less of orthodox states, right, and opening up to communities across the world. So yeah, a good step in that direction, and good for the Indians who live in UAE or in that region. They have a nice temple to go visit for darshan. Yeah.
I think Sarthak had a question on YouTube that why has the BAPS, he said BAPD, I think it's BAPS, which is the Swaminarayan Sampradaya, right? I mean, they belong to that. Why are they so successful in establishing so many temples internationally? Do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I think they have. So I think I would say they have a demonstrable track record, right? So they build these great temple architectures, but they also are able to involve the local communities, right, in terms of various activities. And that sort of becomes a place where, Indians of all, states, etc., it becomes like a meeting point for Indians, right, and a part of their social life in the West, especially. So in that way, I think with an involved community, you are bound to get a lot more success. And I think that is probably one of the reasons for their doing so well.
Right. All right. Well, this is a very geopolitics heavy weekly, I should say. In yet another news, Ukraine blew up a bridge linking to Crimea. The land bridge over the Kerch Strait, vital to supply Russian troops in southern Ukraine, was blown up early Saturday. Ukraine claimed responsibility, and its officials have publicly celebrated, with Ukraine's official Twitter handle simply tweeting, "Sick burn." Crimea's Russian governor, Sergei Aksionov, said, "Of course, emotions have been triggered, and there is a healthy desire for revenge. The peninsula had a month's worth of fuel and more than 2 months worth of food." Neerav, I mean, this I don't know what's really, going to be the end game here, but this doesn't seem to slow down, right?
Yes. So yeah, one is that this war is going to be, it feels like, right? I'm no expert on war, but seems like a war of attrition. Second thing is, like, if you see the location on the map, the Kerch bridge over the Kerch Strait connects Crimea to mainland Russia, which is away from Ukraine, right? So this attack has happened across, like, if Ukraine would say, like, enemy lines. Crimea was annexed by Russia in 2014, and this bridge was built, and this bridge was critical in, like, supplying arms and ammunition and all of that to Crimea. So the Crimean Peninsula, which is on the other side, it is connected to Ukraine, right? It's in the Black Sea, and this has one road and a rail bridge. One of the lanes is destroyed. The other lane for the road bridge is okay. There are pictures of a burning train, but it seems that the railway section, probably with some maintenance, should be good to restart as well. So that is that. The thing is, you are seeing Ukraine also fight back, and they've quite bravely fought back. This tells you that this war is going to be long, and there is no clear pathway unless both sides come down and accept a mutually agreed ceasefire, which also seems difficult, the way Zelensky has been saying that he needs all the part of older Ukraine, including Crimea, to be part of Ukraine, and Russia to vacate. Russia has kind of declared independence for 4 provinces, right? We spoke about it last week. So I think Kherson, Donetsk, Luhansk, yeah, and Zaporizhia, I think. So 4 provinces, they've kind of declared independence. Russia is kind of like pushing further ahead. Ukraine is fighting back and gaining some land in those 4 provinces as well. So I think nothing is very clear. All of this kind of makes it that we spoke about the energy shock. We spoke about, like, the higher slowing global growth, etc. Right? All these shocks, if you see where we are far away from Russia, is going to test the resilience of everybody around. I think Europe is the most fragile. Ukraine, obviously, Ukraine is devastated a lot because there's going to be some repercussions. There's going to be something hitting back. Second is, I think Ukraine has not officially claimed responsibility for it, but a lot of official handles have been celebrating. There has been talk about releasing a postage stamp as well. So we don't know, because it's not exactly a military asset. So we don't know. And second thing is, the sea routes are there, though there might be, like, some underground mines, etc. So yes, but, like, in Crimea specifically, the situation is, like, difficult. So I would say, like, the worst affected areas are the, whatever you would call the disputed areas between Russia and Ukraine. Then next worst is Ukraine, and then as you go further away, and yeah, this war is going to be long. We are going to see a winter coming, and let's see if Europe folds its cards and agrees to a ceasefire along the existing line. It is not too different from what we would say, like, in an Indian context. The line of actual control between India and China, or the line of control between India and, like, Pakistan occupied Kashmir, right? So some sort of a line might be drawn in, and we might see a ceasefire. That probably is the best case scenario. Otherwise, these wars can drag on for long, and the consequences can be huge for the whole world. It is just about keeping your own resilience and making sure that you can deal with the shock. So yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, I think winter is going to bring all of this to a head, right? I mean, the energy prices have already started skyrocketing in places like UK. It's gone up like 5 times in the last few months, etc. So yeah, I mean, interesting times for sure. Well, that brings us to the end of the weekly for this week. Thank you so much again for joining us. We have a couple of interesting episodes coming up. We actually intended to put this episode out this week, but it didn't happen. So you'll likely catch this on Tuesday or Wednesday next week. We have the author Hindol Sengupta. He's going to be talking about his new book, Sing, Dance, and Pray, which is based on Srila Prabhupada, of course, the founder of ISKCON. ISKCON has over 1 million followers worldwide, and it was I think it's a very interesting story. There's a documentary as well that you should definitely catch, right, on how he went to New York. I think it was in the late 60s and started this whole movement and grew it bottom up, right? Yeah, so fantastic content coming up. We also plan to have Jeff Smith, who goes by Cold Peace on Twitter. He's the director of the Asian Studies Center at the Heritage Foundation, and he has very interesting views. Perhaps one of the most interesting persons to follow on geopolitics connected with Asia, India, on Twitter. Right, so we're likely going to have him talk to Velina Chakarova in the Velina's Talk series as well, likely next month. So yeah, plenty of good content coming up. If you have any suggestions around content or guests and so on, please definitely let us know in the comments or reach out to us on social media. We're at Bharatvaarta on all of these social media platforms, and we'd be happy to facilitate these discussions. Thank you again for joining us from Abhishek, Nirav, and myself. Well, stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind.